You're listening to the Full Court Press with your host, Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial.
Pretty good game last night between Ohio State and Indiana. Obviously, we're going to be talking about that on the program this morning. There's going to be a lot more to get to. We're going to be talking about Lane Kiffin's debut at Florida Atlantic. Additionally, we're going to be talking about local high school football. Boy, Southeast took a tough one last night to Cape and Mount Carmel. We're going to be talking about that as well. Obviously, we're going to be discussing Ezekiel Elliott at some point on the program. Multiple and new reports have surfaced that could dramatically alter how everybody may be perceiving this entire thing as it continues to unfold in front of us. We're going to be talking about that on the program as well. We're going to be talking about Florida and Michigan. Yesterday I gave the Florida side of things. Tonight we're going to be giving the Michigan side of things. Additionally, we're going to be talking about Florida State and Alabama. So it is a big program to get to today, guys. Better hit me up now while you can. At Drew Duncan 83 on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. At Drew Duncan 83. This is KYOM 95.9 Wichita, Kansas. We are doing business as KSUN Radio, your community station. I am your host, Drew Duncan. This is the Full Court Press. At Drew Duncan 83 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I don't know how many people saw the Ohio State game last night, but the final score didn't make that game seem as competitive as it actually was. I am telling you right now, Indiana more than held their own. But it's like their coach, Tom Allen, said at halftime, there are no moral victories, none. And unfortunately, that's about all Indiana's going to walk away with after yesterday is another moral victory. A team that's been on the cusp over the last couple of years. This is a team that I projected to go 9-3. I was talking about it yesterday. I felt that they would pull off an upset at some point during the season. I thought if they were going to get one against Ohio State, that they would have to strike accordingly in the first half as I dissected it. And the game basically went pretty much how I believed it was going to. I thought that they were going to play really great for about a half of football. Going into the third quarter, still probably pretty good. And then Ohio State was able to pull away. But I'm telling you right now, Indiana survived some things early on in that game. They scored an initial scoring drive to make it 3-0. I understand 3-0 is not a big deal to most teams, but when you're playing the Ohio State Buckeyes, a team that a lot of people are projecting to be in the college football playoff when it comes season end, there's already a lot of pressure. You're in front of your home crowd. It's the first game of the year. You're super amped. You give up points. But Indiana came in, they took number one, huck and chuck and football worked out for him for a little while. I was really impressed with Regal. He was everything I thought he was going to be. Played a hell of a football game. But unfortunately, there was no running game. That being said, they were able to get down, take a 7-3 lead. Then they get the ball again. They're driving. Unfortunately, they get picked off inside the 20-yard line. Withstand that. Hold Ohio State to a field goal. I thought Indiana carried themselves very well in this football game. They played with a purpose, but with the high-octane offense that they ran and the lack of running game, I think ultimately that was what beat this football team. I just, when I'm watching the game and I'm trying to figure out, what are the real keys to victory or defeat for this team, I think ultimately they just got worn out. There were a couple of game-changing moments, though, that did happen in that third quarter. Ohio State converting a fourth down. Later on, that led to a touchdown in that drive. That was huge for the Buckeyes. I think another thing that actually gave the Ohio State Buckeyes some momentum, believe it or not, and stick with me on this, there was a play that was very controversial in the third quarter. Regal was back to pass. He stepped up into the pocket, tried to make something happen. It looked to me like he fumbled. Then initially, the ruling on the field, they just let it go. Ohio State had returned it back for a touchdown, and then it looked to me like, okay, they're going to run away with this thing now. They reviewed it. They actually reversed the call. I thought, if anything, it was going to be the play stands. They did, in fact, reverse the call, which I thought was very controversial in itself. Now, Indiana's able to go down and score, but I think at that moment, the Buckeyes believed that they had this football team. Because when you're playing a team of this caliber, the one thing that you can't do is turn the football over. And obviously, we saw that in the first half when they turned it over inside the 20. Now, like I complimented a minute ago, because they were able to withstand that initial mistake that they made in the game. But unfortunately, as the game went on, you could see where Ohio State was ready to pounce on mistakes like that. You have to look at it like this. You can only maybe get away with one if you're lucky. After that, I think Ohio State felt like this team is getting nervous. They're getting tired. You were wearing them down up front. They started getting more pressure on the quarterback. Their defense, second half adjustments by Urban Meyer, I thought were phenomenal in that game. I mean, that was really kind of the key, or one of the keys anyways, was Urban Meyer making second half adjustments to their passing game. Just outstanding. Not even 100 yards passing in the second half compared to, what was it, 289 by halftime? I thought it was great. JT Barrett played very well in the second half. Couple of catch and runs, as we just heard right there. And then, of course, obviously the running game. You know, I didn't know how well a freshman was going to perform at running back. I did allude, though, yesterday that I believe that Ohio State is Ohio State and Urban Meyer is going to run the football. One of the things I talked about as a running back is reading the defense when you're a freshman. And some of the cuts that JK made were just outstanding. That kid, I think, has got a future. What was it, 189 yards he had last night? Just amazing. Some of the cutback moves, they're just awesome. It was really good to watch. And this is the thing, right? Yesterday I talked about an Urban Meyer coach football team. When they get down in these situations, to me, they have a tendency to not respond very well. And last night, this football team responded very good in this situation. And because they were able to react appropriately to it, that was what ultimately won them the football game. Because you got to remember, after Indiana had gotten past what I thought was a clear fumble and a touchdown return by the Ohio State Buckeyes on defense, they took it down and scored. And then right after that, Ohio State came back and scored again. They used all of the routes possible. Any route that you could think of, Ohio State did it in that second half. You know, I don't know if maybe in the first half they just weren't trying to open up the playbook and they didn't want to give too much away to the Oklahoma Sooners. Who knows? But I know in the second half what I saw was a lot more diverse. And you got to credit this entire Ohio State football team because they could have laid down, as I've seen them do in the past, the Penn State game, allowing that comeback to happen, the Clemson game, Virginia Tech a couple of years ago, which I'm going to get into that here in a moment. It was, to me, evidence that this Ohio State football team is ready for the next level. To me. Obviously, the game against Oklahoma is going to probably once again dictate how we view the Ohio State Buckeyes. But you got to remember, this is a rivalry game. It's a Big Ten game. It's the first game of the year, and it's on the road. It's everything that I talked about yesterday, that if you were going to pull it off, this was your moment. Because the first game of the season, win, lose, or draw, that place is going to be packed out. It's just the way that it is. First game of the year, 61,000 in attendance at Memorial Stadium, period. It's a sold-out crowd. I mean, they were doing things, they were talking about on the Big Ten Network how they had altered the way that they were doing things just for this game because they knew that there was going to be a huge crowd. It's the overall magnitude of the situation that a win like this could dramatically change your entire year. Of course, the antithesis of that is for Ohio State, a loss could have dramatically changed a year or would have. Look, there's already the overrated talk starting to come about. This is not like a Tennessee team like what we saw last year, struggling with Appalachian State and only winning 13-10, and Appalachian State had umpteen chances to win that football game last season. We're not talking about that. We're talking about an entirely different Ohio State Buckeyes team. And as I alluded to earlier, they lost to Virginia Tech a few years ago with the very first college football playoff year, and a lot of people, including myself, believe that they were overrated, ended up going on to win the college football playoff championship, beating Alabama and Oregon to get there in the playoffs, by the way. And Oregon was a team that beat Florida State the week before Jameis Winston's last football game. So there were no slouches involved when Ohio State made it all the way through the gauntlet that they did. Period. So I don't want to hear this overrated talk yet. But then again, this is why I think top 25 season polls preseason just shouldn't exist till week 4 because of games like this, because we don't really know now. There's a part of me that doesn't even really know yet. I'm not ready to completely drink the Kool-Aid, but I'm not ready to just jump into their overrated this year. I'm not ready for that either. I'm still 50-50 in the balance, and the Oklahoma game is going to probably tell me everything I need to know about this Buckeye team. To me, that's all it really boils down to. And mind you, that game is at Ohio State this year. That game is in the shoe. You know, JT Barrett had a horrendous first half last night. And while he got a lot of help from his receivers on some running plays afterwards, I would rather give credit to the blocking that was downfield from other wide receivers from the Ohio State Buckeyes than anything else. And to me, that was another huge difference. Look, you want to talk about wide receivers who block? It doesn't happen a lot. Believe it or not, Terrell Owens is one of the few guys that I can recall in the NFL off the top of my head that was a great blocking wide receiver. Ed McCaffrey would be another guy that I could think of off the top of my head that was a great blocking wide receiver in the NFL. In college, you see it a little bit more, obviously, because of the running game. But even then, most coaches just use the one-on-one situations to kind of hopefully lead some of that defense away and run that read option play. Zone read option is going to work out a little bit differently for you. You're going to have to do some blocking then. But these guys were blocking downfield that allowed their players to make the right cuts. And the great thing about it was is you saw the way that those Ohio State receivers were not only making blocks, but guys with balls in their hand knew exactly where to go. They knew how to follow their blockers. It was obvious that this had been practiced several times, guys. I'm telling you, this Ohio State football team is elite. When you see guys making downfield blocks that aren't getting you penalties, that's an elite group of receivers. Oklahoma State and Ohio State, to me, have far and away the best wide receiving cores in all of college football. Who do I like better, Mason Rudolph or JT Barrett? We'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about the Oklahoma State game. Dominating win over Tulsa, by the way. Dominant. The point is this. Everything that I saw from Ohio State was likable, especially in the second half, because I knew that they were going to face an onslaught. I knew that they were going to have to withstand a barrage. This is everything I spoke about yesterday. I knew that they were going to have to do those things. I knew in the second half, that was when they were going to have to really perform, and they did. JT Barrett stepped up. Man, you got cobwebs, dude. This isn't the NFL. You don't have a few games of preseason to knock this stuff out. You got a spring game all the way back in March, April, and then you're off for a few months. And then you got to hurry up and get back to college before everybody else, and you got a month and a half of practice, and you got to get back to it. It's not like the NFL where you can try and work some of these things out. And I'll be honest with you, I would rather start against a team like this and on the road and really show my guys, let me see what they're made of and let them see for themselves what they're capable of versus some of these guys that want a game at home against some Division II school that nobody cares about. Or a Central Michigan or an Appalachian State. If I'm Urban Meyer, this was the right move. Because you're getting a little bit of a feel to me of what's going to be expected when you play OU. Because you're going to have that initial surge. Because you've got guys like Baker Mayfield who are still ticked off about last season, I promise you. Because that game was in Oklahoma, guys. And that was flat out nasty. Period. I'm telling you right now, this is the way for Urban Meyer to go. I like it. I think it was a good strategy. It was a good move on the scheduling. I love it. I really do. I actually really love this move. Be on the road, face a really decent opponent in your division, assert yourself. Everything I talked about with how his teams perform late in games sometimes to me just have a tendency to lose it a little bit. By the way, JT Barrett, all-time yardage, total yardage leader in Ohio State history. Over 8,900. I'm going to tell you what, that's saying something. That is definitely saying something. Guys like Eddie George, the two-time Heisman Trophy winner, went to Ohio State, the only one in history. I'm telling you, that's saying something. All the talent that has gone through there. And he's the all-time leader in yards. And he's not even played a lot of full seasons. I'm telling you, JT Barrett is more than what people give him, a lot of fans, I should say, give him credit for. Do I think he's an NFL guy? You know, I would like to see him work on some of his footwork in the pocket, some of his reads on the defense. I'd like to see him a little bit more settled the way that he was in the second half for an entire game of football. I think that he is a guy that does need to rely on the running game, but that's part of what the running game does. It opens things up for your quarterback. Look at what happened with Indiana. They couldn't run the football, and as a result, there were times when they couldn't bleed the clock a little bit, slow the pace of the game down, not give Ohio State so many opportunities. So there you have it. That's how I feel about the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's my synopsis of the game from last night. Period. You can give me your opinion at Drew Duncan 83. That's on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Get your comments read live over the radio. This is the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. You guys are checking me out live from the K-Sun Studios right here in Wichita, Kansas. A lot more to get to. When we come back on the flip side, going to give you a little bit more Florida, going to give you a little bit more Michigan. Later on down the road, we're going to be talking Florida Atlantic and Lane Kiffin, bringing his brother in, bringing his father down as an advisor. He's got a lot of good people around him down there, but Lane Kiffin said something that may blow your mind. We'll talk about it right after this. This is the Full Court Press. I am Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial.